Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Black Life China podcast. I'm your host, Tony. Today, I'm talking with a good friend of mine named Will. Will lives in southern China in the city of Guangzhou. Now, why is that important? It is important because right now, during the whole coronavirus situations happening around the world, there's been news about the mistreatment of Africans and blacks in southern China. Uh, Reportedly, people are being kicked out their homes, not allowed into restaurants, and being harassed by the police, etc. So, having lived that part of China myself in that actual city and having been in those areas of where the African populations live in southern China, I really wanted to reach out to some of my friends who live there or living there currently who's going through this. So one of my friends, a very outspoken gentleman named Will. Will is part Chinese and black, and he's lived in Guangzhou for many years. So I reached out to him via Skype and we decided to do an interview so he can give not only me, but you guys some insight of what's really happening in China. It's kind of hard to know when you're just reading the news or what you're getting off of Facebook. So this is a real account, firsthand account for someone who I trust, who can give you some true insight of what's happening to the African population or just the black population in general in southern China in the city of Guangzhou. There's one caveat I want to say is that my voice on this recording is not that great. Why? Because we did this via Skype, but I don't think that's really important because it's not really about me talking. What I wanted you to hear is his opinion and expressing his thoughts about what's happening in southern China. I think that's the most important thing. If you like this particular episode, this is separated into two parts. This will be part one, part two. But again, we have many more episodes that are fantastic that you should listen to. So if you like this one, listen to other ones at blacklifechina.com. Well, that's it for now. You guys enjoy this episode. I'll talk to you afterwards. Let me know if you can't hear me.
Where you want to begin?
Oh, let's just start in the beginning. Yeah.
I feel like Teddy Riley trying to do his live.
I didn't watch it. Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
I think there's a lag. Yeah, I think there's a lag, which is fine because I'm actually not going to talk that much. Let me set it up. So you've been back and forth in China for many years, but particularly in Guangzhou, that's where we met. And so when the situation started to happen with the coronavirus, and I set my eye on it because I know how China as a government deals with these mass public health crises before, but then things start to pop off, specifically in Guangzhou. With the whole idea of the treatment of the Africans there, or the black community, and it's not a black community. There is also a thing towards foreigners in general, how the government is spinning things. I just, how it's supposed to came from the U.S., whatever military, or a white. That's this video around about how in Arabic they're telling people that it came from the U.S. So there's a lot of spin on it right now, but it's definitely
right.
I'm interested in, having been in Guangzhou and knowing the already pre-existing tension there with the African communities there, how this kind of like lit a fire under it. So just overall, I'm curious, how has your experience been and what have you seen since you've been there when it comes to the coronavirus and the environment in terms of a foreigner's perspective?
Well, pretty much when the whole thing started off in Wuhan, it was during the lunar New Year celebration, the Spring Festival. So, pretty much the cities were a little quiet anyway, because everybody was in their hometowns or what have you. So when it first started, it wasn't as much of a shock or like a big change at that time. because, like I said, everyone was already out of the city. So I guess I didn't really start to feel anything until recently when the second wave of the outbreak uh, occurred here in Guangzhou itself. And then this whole thing about like Nigerian, this one Nigerian guy who was a carrier, he didn't suffer from any symptoms, but the people he came around were getting infected. And so then it started with the whole testing of Nigerians, and it spread it off to like all the people in the African community in Shaobei and Bayun district and Yueshu district. And so in Taojing, where I usually frequent because the shop that I go to is there, and that's just like one stop away from Bay on the subway. So that's when I noticed like a shift in people's attitudes. And I was stopped by a couple of city employees that were, I guess, like making sure that people from that ground zero weren't like, out and basically, they had to self quarantine again. And so,
Hold on.
you know,
Wait for a second. So that Shao Bay, for people listening, that's a train stop where it has like all majority of the African shops are set up and put their little district there in that one area, and Taojing the next stop. As wanted to clarify that people listening.
okay.
But now, talk about these two waves real quick, because I didn't know that. Like, I kind of knew that they had a situation where they were getting, quote unquote, getting it under control, but and then the two ways that like it, I mean, they had to be aware that it didn't start with foreigners, right? So I'm just kind of confused on this. Like, where this kind of like not discipline, but this focus was this kind of
I mean,
support. Yeah, go ahead.
well, I mean, I think I know where you're going with the question because, I mean, I was thinking the same thing myself. It's like if everybody was already self quarantined during the Wuhan outbreak and the shutdown of the different cities within, central and southern China, I thought it was kind of weird because all incoming and outgoing flights were stopped. You know, some people in America, Chinese citizens that wanted to come back, their flights were canceled. And foreigners who were trying to get back to America, their flights were canceled. So we're pretty much stuck here. Nobody's going anywhere. And so, yeah, I was kind of questioning this whole re-emergence of the outbreak, after the quarantine, because you know, it took like 2 weeks or 14 days for any symptoms to manifest. And if you didn't show any symptoms, everybody pretty much assumed we were cool. And so when we heard this report that like this supposedly this one Nigerian guy, his wife or was got sick afterwards, then they started testing other people that other areas or shops he frequent, and like the shop employees were infected. And so I don't know. I mean, it was kind of weird for me to like comprehend why this outbreak, this second outbreak was occurring, especially only in the Xiaobei area, because it's already known that um, like with the government, local or government officials, that always target that that immigrant or foreign community, because it's like it's always been said, like even by white foreigners who lived here, it's been a source of maybe some illegal activity, or they're always checking because most of the Nigerians would let their passports or their visas expire and overstay, stuff like that. But I'm sure that's not just that community or that nationality of people that have that same problem, you know, out of all the
Mm-hmm.
foreigners here. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, so to me, I don't know, I feel like there's a little undercurrent of political of a political agenda along with it. I mean, maybe it's just me being uh you know paranoid, or but growing up in America and knowing how governments do these covert things with these underlying agendas, I question. So, and the thing is here, like a lot of backlash I've been getting on the Chinese social media, Weibo, some people reach out to me and try to communicate, uh, why certain things happen, and then some of them try to give examples of what happened initially, like a Nigerian patient, supposedly bit a Chinese nurse, and um,
And so now it's
yeah,
Africans biting people rather than that's an interesting reinterpretation. Wow, about what
yeah.
happened. That's crazy.
So yeah, so I mean, I really don't know. I didn't hear about that until after the fact, because when I made some
Mm-hmm.
posts of some people that went down to the area that heard that a lot of these people were getting kicked out of their hotel rooms or their residencies, wherever they were renting, and they were out on the street. Good Samaritans, Chinese, and foreigners went down there to give them food, masks, and what have you. Then, I get all these racist attacks, like, and, go back to Africa. And it's like, first of all, I'm American. And, then they have, you know, and whatever did happen with that individual person doesn't cut blanket the whole community. So the xenophobia, phobia, or racist anger, towards the whole community for one person is still it's not logical. And and I came back at a lot of these people with the same thing, is that what's happening to Asians in the Western countries, whether it's Europe or in America. And I just saw a post that my friend sent me, who's Canadian. He was saying that there's a lot of anti Chinese sentiment in Toronto, and Canada has a huge Asian population,
Yeah, I
especially from
know.
China.
Yeah.
So then reports of European countries wanting to sue China, the Chinese government, as for what happened to their countries, with their people or their economy because of the virus outbreak. And I have a Chinese friend here who got upset at an American friend who like during the Wuhan thing was stating that like I guess there was some reports stating that the virus came from Europe initially, then went to the States and not from China. So you have all this what could be misinformation or fake news. So you really don't know what's going on. And no governments trust each other, and nobody trusts news agencies because even in America, they're corporate owned, state or government owned, and so nobody trusts the numbers coming out of China as far as the death tolls. Some say it could have been more or what have you, but so you have all this cloud of suspicion about what's going on, but there's one thing that's consistent, though. Everybody blames China. And so you have Europe and North America angry at China. Now they pissed off the whole continent of Africa. And so
but
then
let's talk about for a second. Like you were saying earlier, that there seems to be something underneath all of this, where obviously it's not the only people in Xiaobei who contracted the coronavirus. Obviously, there's the other people in China that are Chinese. They had it also, but it's just focused on that community. And you feel like there was some like underdealing, not underdealing, but there was some like, I can't think of the term right now, but there's been a focus on that, like using this as a cover up in order to finally get at that community that they're trying to tear down anyways. Do you think that they were expecting this blowback from the various African nations? That you're right, Africa is not taking this lightly at all.
Well, I think the thing is too with the, I don't know, because of the Great Wall of China, firewall of China, a lot of communication is blocked about the world. So when they think about Africa, they think of it as one country instead of a continent with many countries. So, and when I was in Ghana last summer, the end of last summer, a lot of the same things the Chinese people say about Africans in Guangzhou or Xiaobei or what have you, the people from Ghana were saying the same thing about the Chinese, and a lot of them are overfishing, polluting their land, and so I mean, to them, I say to the Ghanaian people, it's like you got to blame your government officials for that. Nobody can come in your house and start messing up your house without your permission.
True.
So I think maybe it took something like this to what happened to like a lot of the people from the different African countries to wake up. Tanzania just canceled some $1 billion US dollar Chinese loan from that they were going to receive in Tanzania. The president just rejected it. First he suspended it, then he rejected it, and you have like the former head of the African Union. She spoke out. She did a video, talking about that what's happening to people from these various African countries was unacceptable, and they need to change that. Then I had a Chinese friend send me some government notice, a government notice stating, that anybody who's, who's who feels they've been subjected to any type of prejudice or racial profiling, they can call this government number, to report this business or this establishment. And so, I hear the things that are coming out saying, "Oh, we're not racist," and this and that, but I mean, it even happened to me. A couple of places just flat out rejected my business. Me, patronizing their establishment. So
Yeah, I saw that.
yeah, and it's just like and some of the people in the area were just saying it's like the government officials told them that. So isn't I mean they say foreigner in a blanket term, but really
Hmm.
like in some cases they flat out just state just black foreigners. And I don't know, it's just kind of is I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me because all right, the virus outbreak started here in China. You know, that's where it all kicked off. Then the hardest hit countries have been European countries, even when there were no cases in on the continent of Africa in any African countries. So for them to use this excuse with Nigeria, it just seems kind of weak and suspect. And
No, it makes
so, oh, go ahead.
no, no. Saying it makes sense. Like when back in 2000, 2003, during SARS, it was very much the same way. I was in Beijing at the time when it hit. So I was in at the epicenter of SARS. And so the news pretty much spent it that way. It's always this constant blame on Africa. It's very, very, every time something
Oh,
big
they
pops
did the
off,
same
Africa's to
thing
blame.
then too.
100%. So when I was in China, and a lot of people, I was in a language program. It's my first year going to China, and most of the foreigners left. I stayed because it was my one and only chance at that time to go study language. So I can go home. I stayed through the whole thing in Beijing. And the news pretty much, yes, it tried to blame Africa overall again. It was
Wow,
it's the
I didn't
go-to.
even know that.
Oh, 100%. They're already trying to find ways to say how it came from Africa in some kind of way. So when I start hearing that what was happening, particularly in Guangzhou and many other places, I was like, oh, this is old hat. I mean, this is exactly what they did in 2002. The government did this exact thing. Um, so yeah, it's a common thing to blame Africa. To be honest, I mean, yeah. So when all it starts to pop off, I was like, oh yeah, okay, they're playing that old game again, that old tired game again. Let's focus on
But
the black people.
it's kind of weird for like Chinese officials to do that, especially like when um, government influence in Africa and other parts of Asia is pretty heavy, especially like with these. I mean, I don't like the loans anyway because they're debt loans to indebt a lot of these African countries into to keep them indebted to China, like the
Yeah.
European countries have done, especially France. And the Frank zone, they call it in West Africa. Like, they just, you know, keep them bogged down in so much financial, just to be dependent on them, where they have no way of being free of their country's grasp on their resources and or in most cases, their people too. So, uh, for the, for government officials to do that to the African community here was unbelievably um, not smart. Because
No, you're right. You're right.
so, I mean, it's been reports in different countries, like some places they won't let Chinese people in their establishments anymore. And I think I forget the country. I know I posted it earlier, and I think it's Guinea, um, that they locked up the Chinese foreigners, and and so basically they made a demand, like, if they don't send if their citizens don't come back from China safe and sound, that whatever happens to their citizens in China, they're going to do to the Chinese foreigners in their country. So I'm like, whoa. And
Yeah.
but I think I was trying to make this point earlier, like when it came to the blowback of what's happening in Xiaobei, is the fact that the people here, they don't care, or they don't think about the Chinese and the Asian diaspora, like whether the Chinese are living in Europe, America, or in Africa. They don't think about what their actions here is going to, how it's going to impact the other Asians or Chinese in other countries. So, especially like with the racist attacks that I've been getting on Weibo, and and this is what I reiterate to them, what I just said to you. It's like, you telling me to leave your country, or I should be grateful to be here. It's like, this ain't America. I mean, you're raising out of being a third world country. Okay. I come from a first world country. So, don't get it twisted. This is not like know, a, a well-oiled machine. And so I think that's probably another thing too, is that maybe they think of Africa as being a third world country, when it's not a country, it's a continent. And a lot of these, especially when I was in Ghana, a lot of these places are as developed as China, and they don't think that. They do not think that.
So you see this as a way of
No,
you see it as a way of China trying to so the perception out there, you're saying, on the Weibo, is China's not seen itself as a developing nation that it is, and it's kind of like separating itself from like the African nations, and like well, I always found this when I was there. There is this thing about economy and treatment, and I
right,
remember back in the day I was doing my research back in 2006 about the treatment of African or blacks in China. While I think overall there's an overall same treatment somewhat, I also found there was difference in treatment based on what nation you're from. I found that there
that's
was,
true.
in some situations, as an African American, I was treated differently, or had access to opportunities, had privileges that my friends from my Cameroonian or Niger friends didn't have in some situations. And I'm like, well, there is the issue of blackness, but then there's this also issue of nation. I saw a similar thing with Russians. They're quote unquote white, right? But like in
Right,
Harbin, northeastern China, Chinese, they don't, New York, they usually pick up black people on the side of the road from a taxi. And Harbin, they don't
right,
pick up white people, from my experience in taxis. They prefer not to, because it was this thoughts towards Russian people they had up there. It was different, right? And also, I noticed that when I was in Beijing teaching there, if you were uh, if you were from a country, although you were white, but you were from a country that wasn't deemed developed beyond China, then you were treated differently. You didn't get the same access to opportunity. So if you could pass if you were
Right.
Russian, for example, but you still didn't get the pay that a person from America would have received. You see what I mean?
Right.
So there is, I mean, there's this overlapping layer of color, right? But then also of nation, and that becoming
Right.
a different dynamic in how one's treated over there also. And so the point of me
Yeah.
saying is,
How much respect you would get. Yeah.
which means that if it's based off nation, is really based off of, who my thoughts are, economy. If like
Right.
if your country's seen as having more financial or economic power, then the statement about that country or who you are will be somewhat different. Does that make any sense, Steve? I'm kind of fleshing it out, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I understand totally what you're saying because knowing like how a lot of the people think on a social level between men and women, and like with status, yeah, what you said was 100% correct. The what country you come from and the economy of that country, you would uh, gain a higher level of social status here or respect. You know, I didn't really think about it too much before because I never lived in a place where people cared about such things like that.
And there we go. That was the episode with Will, part one at least. And we have part two coming also. I hope you enjoyed that one. If you did, come back for more. Or while you wait for the second part, listen to our other podcasts at blacklifechina.com. Or you can find us on iTunes or wherever you find your podcasts. Or you can also help us out a little bit and look into supporting us by ordering some of our designs at cardboardclothing.com. That's cardboard with the K. If you have any questions or if you want to share your experiences in China, please feel free to email us at info@blacklifechina.com. Again, it's info@blacklifechina.com. Other than that, you guys have a great day.